All right, the Senate will come back to order. The Senate will come back to order. All right, we're now going to move on to the supplemental calendar. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of House Bill 911?
House Bill 911 by Representative Setzler of the 35th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 6 of Title 16 and Article 2 of Chapter 3 of Title 35, Article 3 of Chapter 5 of Title 42, and Article 1 of Chapter 2 of Title 49 of the OCGA, relating to sexual offenses, the Georgia Crime Information Center, conditions of detention generally, and general provisions regarding the Department of Human Services, respectively, so as to provide for the offenses of improper sexual conduct by a foster parent in the first and second degree and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends this bill do pass. Senator Stone of the 23rd District, Chair. That completes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 56th to present House Bill 911.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a very important bill that gets back to a core priority of this body, which is enhancing the foster care system in order to protect the most vulnerable in our state. I am so proud of the Georgia Senate and the great work we have done over the years to protect these children. This bill has got great foundation, and I want to take a moment to thank the First Lady of Georgia, Marty Kemp, and our Governor, Brian Kemp, as they have worked over these last couple years to make foster care one of their many priorities. This bill does something that you would think is rather simple and probably should have been done in the past. It simply says that if you are a foster parent and you engage in improper sexual contact with a child under your care, that is a crime, and it should be a crime. I think this is straightforward. I hope it is something we never have to prosecute, but we want people to know that we're going to take care of the foster children in the great state of Georgia. Mr. President, if there are no questions, I will yield the will.
Does any senator have a question? Chair sees none. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against House Bill 911? The chair sees none. Is there objection or agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill? All those in favor vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? Got a couple more in the hallway. All right, I'm getting a thumbs up from the hallway. All senators voted. Mr. Secretary, please lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 48, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. All right, you've got a supplemental consent calendar of local bills before you. Mr. Secretary, are there any objections filed to any bills on that local consent calendar supplement? Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the Committee on State and Local Government, which is favorable to the passage of the bills on the supplemental local consent calendar? The chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. The question is on the passage of the bills on the local consent calendar. All those in favor will vote yea, opposed nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. For what purpose does the senator from the 24th rise? He waves. Have all senators voted? Must be a party over there. Y'all keep running out of there late. All senators voted. Got a thumbs up from the hallway. Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the passage of the bills on the local consent calendar, the yeas are 43, the nays are 1, and the bills having received the requisite constitutional majority are therefore passed. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of H.R. 1094?
House Resolution 1094 by Representative Donahue of the 30th and others. A resolution authorizing the granting of a non-exclusive easement for the construction, installation, operation, and maintenance of facilities, utilities, and ingresses and egresses in, on, over, under, upon, across, or through property owned by the state of Georgia in Barrow, Calhoun, Chatham, Cherokee, Clayton, Cobb, and other counties and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Government Oversight recommends that this resolution do pass. Senator Heath of the 31st District Chair. Mr. President, the Senator from the 22nd, Senator Jones, and others offer the following amendment number 1 to House Resolution 1094 by striking line 5 and replacing it with, quote, Paulding and Polk counties to provide for related matters to provide for and, close quote, by striking line 1 and replacing it with, quote, Muskogee, Paulding, and Polk counties and, close quote, by striking Article 15 and renumbering accordingly. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 31st to speak to H.R. 1094.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. Just as a few minutes ago, we had the annual conveyance bill. This is the annual easements bill, and I apologize, I didn't count them, but there are a number of easements in here where the state is granting an easement across a piece of property that it owns, and I'll be glad to entertain any questions, but this, as I said, is the annual easements bill, and I would urge your favorable support.
Does any other senator have a question? Chair sees none. Chair recognizes the senator from the 22nd to speak to amendment number 1.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm asking for support for amendment number 1, which basically would take Augusta-Richmond County out of this particular easement provision and allow us to have a local zoning issue to be determined locally. Basically what has happened here is that we have a zoning issue that is taking place in Augusta, and this easement is basically trying to kind of tip the scales between the parties that are involved in this particular zoning issue. So I can kind of go through it. Currently, the property is zoned for residential. It's trying to get a variance for a commercial to do a drug treatment facility for first responders and others. So let's kind of go through it. The property is a convent, okay? It is a convent. It is located within a neighborhood. This is not across the street, but is actually in the neighborhood and is integral to this particular neighborhood. Now, somebody may ask, well, how do you know so much about the neighborhood? Is that I actually grew up there, and persons in my family actually still lives there. So this is actually, as we talked about the other day, a scorecard vote for me, because it is persons that I've known my entire life who's there. This neighborhood only has 4 streets in it, so it's not a large neighborhood. This is actually located in the neighborhood, as I stated. So this issue has come up twice now in our city. First, it came up in 2017. It was going to be a youth development center, and that was defeated. In 2018, it was going to be a drug treatment facility, and that did not get the required votes. It came back up in 2019, and the party said, well, now we're going to just do it for quote-unquote first responders. So we go from a juvenile detention center to a regular drug treatment facility, and then to first responders, still drug treatment facility. Each time trying to kind of move the bar to try to pull at heartstrings to some extent. So as I said, this convent is integral to the neighborhood. The parties have grown up there for years. And so Each time this variance has been sought, it has not passed, or it did not get the required votes. One of the issues, and it's a very small issue, there are many issues that exist in this property, was traffic. So to try to alleviate that, parties have decided to go and try to get an easement through this Augusta Tech property, which is next to the neighborhood. And that way, when we go back to our zoning question in August, the parties can say, well, the state of Georgia has given us this easement to go around. That was only one issue that the neighborhood is concerned about, and that was actually further down the list. What this is an attempt to do is basically tip the scales, to be able to walk back in and say the state of Georgia supports this, when in reality that's not true, because many of you have no idea what's even going on here. It's a truly local issue. It is a private company. It is not a state entity. It is a private company, and this is a battle that has been going on now for 2.5 years. So many times when persons oppose this, we hear something like, these persons are afraid or not in my backyard or things of that nature. And nothing could be further than the truth. The fact of the matter is that we all have divisional lines. Their lines right now are, this neighborhood wants to keep that residence residential and not have a variance to commercial. We all create these lines. We have lines on speeding. We have speeding lines. We have lines as far as how you can apply for jobs. For instance, if we're talking about drugs, for instance, and I just did a cursory search. The Carrollton Police Department says if you test positive, you don't get an opportunity to work for their police department. The Georgia Department of Public Safety says that if you even are around persons that are known to use narcotics, you're not allowed to work for them. Those are lines. So these neighbors have a line, and they have said, all we want to do is keep our neighborhood residential. That's their only request. And so therefore, their request is no more illegitimate than the lines that we create saying what speeding is going to be, or the lines that the Carrollton Police Force and other police forces say that if you test positive for drugs, we'll fire you, or the line that the Department of Public Safety says that if you're even around persons that use drugs, you can't even get hired. We all create these lines. So don't delegitimize these persons' concerns and call them NIMBY, or they don't understand, or they're fearful, because this state has created our own lines around various issues. So their concern is to keep it residential. My concern is that come August, this continues to be a regular, fair fight between the parties. And that's all. Nobody can walk in and say the state of Georgia agrees with me, the state of Georgia doesn't agree with me. We should walk in and have the zoning issue and have it out in Augusta. This doesn't concern state property. It doesn't concern any state institutions. It doesn't concern necessarily any state interest. It is strictly a zoning issue in Augusta. Now, there may be some who say, well, we really need this. And if we don't have it, it will be terrible for whoever they're trying to serve. But I also want to point this out too, because I think it's important. The facility is going to be a 30 to 45-day facility. That's what the facility will be. That's important, because as persons say how important this is, I want to bring something out to you. Most commentators and most persons say, experts, actually state that a 30 to 45-day facility is not the proper facility for rehabilitation. For instance, Ann Fletcher of Inside Rehab, a book, says that 30-day facilities are not scientifically based. This idea that we have a 30-day facility is not based on science. It is basically based on two things. One, the military created this, and also that's what insurance companies would pay for. Marvin Ventrell, the executive director of the National Association of Addiction Treatment Providers, says 30 days became the norm because the insurance industry was willing to pay for that period. but there's nothing scientific about it. So as persons may walk up here and say, we have to have this, this is the only way we can save people. That's not true. But what I really want to impress upon you is this. This is the key. Why are we arguing about this in the Georgia General Assembly? This is not a Georgia General Assembly issue. It's an issue for Augusta, Georgia. And that's all. Every elected official that represents this community is on record of opposing this. I represent this community directly. I'm opposed to it. The person in the House of Representatives who represents this is opposed to it. The school board trustee is opposed to any change. The county commissioner is opposed to it. It's actually represented by 2 county commissioners. We have one county commissioner who represents what they call District 6. He's opposed to it. We have a super district commissioner opposed to it. These are not just words, they voted that way. This is a local issue, and I only ask to keep it a local issue. That is all I ask, that we allow the citizens of Augusta to go through the process, and that the state of Georgia does not try to put its finger one way or the other on how this operates. Allow this local issue to play out. It will be very soon, in a month, month and a half, in August, we will have our discussion again. And I only ask that the state of Georgia not get involved. All the issues that I'm giving to you, whether 30 to 45-day facilities work, arbitrary lines drawn about drugs, that's nothing we ought to even be discussing. Those are things that should be discussed at that hearing in August. So all I ask is that we on this day allow for this amendment to go forward and allow the citizens of Augusta, as they have been doing, wrestle with this issue and resolve this issue among themselves without interference from the state in any way. And that is my request. And I'll be happy to take any questions, Mr. President, before I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 33rd for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Yes.
So basically, are you saying that this is a family feud and we should see our way out of it?
That's correct. I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's just a family feud, and the state of Georgia really doesn't have an interest in this particular feud, and allow us to just have our family feud, basically.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 15th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
Yes.
Senator, I have a question to ask to buttress your contention that this is a local issue. Is it not true that this issue did not come through the State Institutions and Property Committee?
That is
normal
correct.
avenue for that.
That is absolutely correct, and I'll point out that normally this issue would come through your particular committee, but it did not on this occasion.
Thank you.
Do you continue to yield?
Yes.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 2nd for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Gentleman in well, do you yield?
Yes.
Senator, does this neighborhood lie in your district?
Absolutely. Lies completely in my district, firmly into my district. You know, there are some times where you have neighborhoods that might be on the prefaces of it. It's right in the heart of my particular district, and it's been in District 22 ever since District 22 has been created. It's not one that was recently put in there. It is solidly in District 22.
Does the gentleman for the yield?
Yes.
Senator, does this neighborhood have neighborhood meetings talking about what their wishes are, and what their wishes, and what they do not want in their neighborhoods?
Absolutely, they do. And they've been doing that, and they have attended all the county commission meetings, all the zoning meetings, and they actually separate the persons who are there. And it's a good thing that the zoning committee does that. They separate the parties, and they say who is here in favor of the zoning change and who is here against it. And the last time they did that, and this is actually record, those against it were from the neighborhood, and all were from Richmond County. All of the persons that raised their hand were from the neighborhood, and they were from Richmond County. And it's interesting that those who were actually for the change, none of them were from the neighborhood, and probably 60 to 70% of them did not even live in Richmond County.
Does the gentleman for the yield?
Yes.
Senator, isn't it not true that if we take no action on this, and we give you until August or this fall to meet, and if they can't come to an agreement, can't we come back next year and address the same issue?
They're going to have to come to an agreement. So we're not asking that to take any action. We're just asking to pull Augusta out. And that is really to clarify, there's really no action. It puts us where we are. It puts us where we've always been, to where it's just a regular easement issue without anybody being able to say, well, the state supports this. That's not accurate. Just allow us to go back in front of the zoning committee, go back in front of the county commission. It's not going to be held up. In August, a decision is going to be made. Once that decision is made, if it's made to make the zoning change, then those persons certainly would come back here in January and say, hey, we've won. Now things are different because now we have a reason maybe to go around the neighborhood. And even my posture may be different. But this is trying to change how we view this particular battle. It's designed to go into these neighborhoods, go into the zoning commission meeting and say the state of Georgia has voted. The state of Georgia heard all of these concerns, and they voted basically in our favor. That's how it's going to be couched. I guarantee you that's how it will be couched.
Does the gentleman further yield?
Yes.
Isn't it true, sir, that the gentleman from the senatorial district of 22 believe in local control?
Yes, absolutely. And I will reiterate to show that there have been circumstances in this body and that persons have changed their magistrate court judgeships that I've completely disagreed with and never went to the well to say that because that's their local concern. I think judges actually should be partisan elected, but there have been at least 2 occasions where persons have changed their local judgeships, their magistrate judgeships, to nonpartisan. They moved them from partisan to nonpartisan. This senator has not ever gone to the well to mention anything about that because that is your district and that is your concern, and that's not a concern of the senator from District 22.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 10th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the senator yield?
Yes.
Senator, I'm a little bit confused because during the introduction of this bill, the senator from the 31st said it was a kind of a routine bill, so I was led to believe this was a routine matter. It appears as if this is anything but. Is that correct, Senator?
That is absolutely correct. In fact, if you look at the provision, if you look at the document, most of these easements are for Georgia Power or Diverse Power. They're usually for a public purpose. They're usually to do power lines or something underground for parks or whatever it may be. This is going to a private company. The fact that it's quote-unquote nonprofit, persons, if you understand nonprofits, that only means that you're able to get other funds. It doesn't necessarily mean that, that you're some kind of way government related. So it's to a private company for their particular purpose. They're not licensed by the state. They're not doing anything that the state of Georgia has asked them to do. It is a private company to do private company business. Totally different than almost 90-something% of the things you see here. All of these things are for true public purposes, to actually help with parks or help with different things that need to be built for the entire community, not to private companies. So this is not routine at all. And it's really bad that we're actually having this conversation, because I could imagine persons are wondering, what in the world, what is he even talking about? Because this is an Augusta issue, and we ought to be resolving it in Augusta.
Senator, you for
Yes.
just one final question. Senator, I heard you mention that this could kind of tip the scales. Are you anticipating that there will be lawsuits in any way that could be impacted by our decision today?
Absolutely. I think that the neighborhood may look at that and take whatever action they might want to. It's also going to possibly harden any kind of negotiations too. There may be ways to actually still talk about some of these things. But I think to come to a body and involve persons that you know for a fact have nothing to do with this, maybe actually would change the dynamics of how some of these conversations even go in a negative way.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Do you continue to yield for questions?
Yes, Mr. President. I
Chair
will for a couple
recognizes
more.
the senator from the 14th for a question.
Thank you.
Senator Yield,
Yes.
Senator, are you asking for a favor here?
No, I think a favor would be doing something that would be unusual. I think in this situation, what you're really asking for is that this body, which is integral to itself, which we always talk about, that local is important and local control is the key. I think I'm just asking that we continue to basically go the way we always say that we are, that local matters. So in that sense, it's not really a favor. It's just asking to do what we normally would do, which is to say that is your particular district, that is your area. It doesn't affect us all statewide, and you guys should be able to resolve this to yourself.
Senator, earlier, do you further yield?
Yes.
Senator, earlier this week, did you not come to me and ask for a favor to have an emergency hearing in veterans so that you could have a resolution heard for a cemetery?
That's correct, because I'd actually missed that. So in that situation, I needed you to do something that was above what we normally do. I needed that. This fits exactly what we do. Local control matters. This fits. Let's just let the locals resolve it. So it's not really a favor. It's just saying let's be what we are, the Georgia State Senate, and let locals handle local matters.
Senator, I think both of these are favors, but I'm yielding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You
I'll
have-
yield for one more question.
You have no more questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. I yield the one.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 24th to speak to the measure and the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, I rise to oppose this amendment. Ladies and gentlemen, it's always two sides of the picture. And what's happening here is I represent part of Richmond County. And what we have here is a situation that we passed a bill here last year to help our policemen, our first responders, our people that protects us, that takes care of us. When they need help, we got a great opportunity to give it to them here. We have a facility in Augusta that would be an awesome place for them to go to get help when they get into depression. It'll be one of a kind in the whole United States. Law enforcement, ambulance, first responders can go and get help. There are people in Richmond County that won't see us. Yes, there's some that don't want it. One of the concerns was they didn't want to come out of the neighborhood. So we reached out and tried to find a way to where we can find another way to get in and out of the piece of property. And we did this, and that's what we're doing here. We're here to help our people that protects us, and I ask you to vote against this amendment.
Senator has yielded the well. The chair recognizes the senator from the 29th to speak to the measure.
Fellow senators, I rise. Going into the Oversight Committee meeting, reading everything seemed fairly normal, as they would on most legislation like this. And then as the presentation went on, things seemed to get contentious. So started listening and in a way and doing more research on it, and discovered exactly what the senator from the 24th said, was that this easement, the center is going there. The easement does not prevent these, the individuals that want to start this rehab center there from driving through the neighborhood. The reason they don't want to drive through the neighborhood, and it's only about 25 cars a day, is because the neighbors in that neighborhood have asked that they not. So in order to appease, the tech school became the second option. And then there was pushback on that. And it slowly became evident to the individuals involved who I spoke with that the concern may not have been that, and it may have been something else. And the senator from the 22nd is absolutely right when he talks about addiction. 45 days is not enough time for an individual who's addicted to anything to get a full grasp and to come out the other side of addiction. And what you'll find out in the addictions that are involved in the first responder community is their addictions aren't cocaine, their addictions aren't heroin, things of that nature. A lot of times their addictions are certain kind of opiates related to pain or injuries that have been caused on the job, and at times alcohol, because the rates of PTSD are extremely high in the careers of firefighters, peace officers, and EMTs, because of the constant slideshow that they live most of the days of their lives on the things they experience. Vince being one of those individuals, Vince had a long career with the Columbus Police Department. Vince was a good guy, and as his career started to slow down and his career was coming to an end, Vince realized that his eyesight was going away and he was no longer going to be able to qualify with his weapon. So Vince went out looking for someone in the public health community that he felt, mental health community, that he felt that could help him transition from a long career as a law enforcement officer into the life of a retired law enforcement officer. And Vince was not able to find that help. And Gary, who I had the opportunity to start under the direction of Police Chief Jim Weatherington and Sheriff Gene Hodge, the first conditional discharge program in the United States, where I got a lot of education from addictionologists and others, spent some time out at Abbott Laboratories in Texas to understand the science of drug testing. And Gary had a great career, became injured on the job, had to retire early, and had a very hard time transitioning. And when he went out to find the help he needed to help with the transition, Gary could not find that help either. So when Vince could not find the help several years ago, Vince came up with a solution of his own. And during this past session last year, when many of us were at a movie that was premiering about Right to Life, I turned my phone off, and when I came out, I had probably about 20 missed messages on my phone. And I answered my phone. I called my friend back, my partner, that I worked with for 4 years in the narcotics unit. And he advised me that Gary had finally found the only help he thought he could find. And that help was not in a rehab center. And so the uniqueness of this situation, I think, should weigh on all of us. Because 45 days, the senator is absolutely right. Nobody is going to be cured of any addiction in 45 days, and science shows that, and we all know that within our own families, whether it's cigarettes, alcohol, or anything else. But if there's a place that we can put together, as the senator from the 24th said, that will exclusively offer help, mental health, to our first responders, and we can do this in a way that I think the fear that exists should not be there, and I would respectfully ask that you vote against the amendment. Thank you.
Senator has yielded the well. The chair recognizes the senator from the 56th to speak to the measure and the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank all my friends here. I know the senator from the 22nd is passionate about protecting his family and district, and I respect that greatly. A couple of things were said, though, that are a little bit out of order. We did have some comments from the senator from 24th. This will be the first of its kind. Peace officers' #1 cause of death is suicide. Let me say that again. It's not heart disease. It's not cancer. It's not an accident. It's suicide. And for those of us that have actually done this for decades, like the senator from the 29th and some others, or maybe some of my good friends who have served in the military on the front lines of seeing combat, you will never know what we have saw. You cannot unsee the things we have seen. And some of it is the absolute worst in humanity. You would go home and you would hug your spouse and your children every night after seeing that. There are things that even today, I will tell you every time I close my eyes, I can still see as it happened so many years ago. So if not now, when? If not there, where? These folks are doing something spectacular. Is it 30 days? Is it 45 days? I don't know, but most of them are going to have some type of a need. It's not a drug treatment center. It's a place to help first responders for all the things that they are facing. This easement is specific to them. I did chair the State Institutions and Property Committee in the past. I appreciate the chairman from the 15th and the great work he does. This is not an uncommon thing to do. This easement does not impact the local government's ability to approve or disapprove zoning requests and does not impact local control. It simply provides the easement. So let's not confuse the two issues. This is important. I'm going to ask you vote down the amendment and vote for this bill. Thank you. I yield the will.
Senator has yielded the well. The chair recognizes the senator from the 55th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. Over the years, I have seen so many situations like this. If it's not a landfill, if it's not a place to take care of people that are addictive, want to be put in a nice neighborhood, I ask you, do you want this facility in your neighborhood? I would say, no, you don't. Now, it appears to me that there are two senators in here. One of them, senator from the 24th, has one precinct. Senator from the 23rd has 12, but they're nowhere near the affected area. And the House member has no precincts. According to the information from the senator from the 22nd, he opposes, the state rep opposes, both county commissioners oppose, and the school board trustee oppose. So where is the common ground? Doesn't seem like there's any. So I would say to this body that if you don't want this in your neighborhood, and I don't want it in my neighborhood, find someplace else where it's more amenable and not in the neighborhoods of people. It's a residential area. This sounds like something more commercial. It's a business. So I would ask the members of this body to vote in favor of the senator from the 22nd amendment. I yield the well, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the minority leader to speak to the bill and the amendment resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, hesitated to come down because it's not a partisan fight. It's not the senator from the 22nd or 55th and the 41st. It's not a partisan thing. You know, each session we go through it and we have a lot of tough decisions and we have to check our heart and see what's right and wrong. We know that this issue is a local issue. We know it affects the senators from the 22nd districts. And in your heart, you know that you would want to be treated with the same respect that he shows you. And you would want to treat most of your members in this body with the same respect Senator from the 22nd shows you. Senator from 22nd this morning at caucus, he talked to members about the budget. We talked about, not holding a partisan line on the budget coming in to the next day, but he talked about members and their districts and how some people's districts are poor and how 5,000 meant a lot to a neighborhood or 10,000. These things are important because politics is local. This is a local issue. He treats you with respect. And what's going to happen if we don't treat individuals with respect in regards to their own districts? What's going to happen? Ladies and gentlemen, the worst is going to happen. There'll be no compromise. There'll be no discussions on important issues. We don't want that. We don't want that here. We want to be able to talk across the aisle. We want to be able to take two constituents, we're Democrat and Republican, try to do the best thing for both of them. Try to help explain why we do what we do. Find the middle ground sometimes and stand our ground sometimes. Ladies and gentlemen, today is the day. Search your conscience, do the right thing, find the middle ground, support the amendment, Senator from the 22nd, and then pass this easement bill so we can go on with the state's business. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th to speak to the resolution and the amendment.
So I want to approach this from a different angle, and I kind of want to refocus this body because this resolution does not pass judgment on the importance of treatment for first responders. Let's be clear, okay? I think we all value that, and we all think that's important. So I want to put that to the side for a second. This is about easements, and an easement is a property right, is a granting of a property right, right? Property was not my best law school class, but I'm going to talk about it. It's a right, and it's valuable. And so what we're doing in this bill is granting an easement to a private company when the project hasn't even been approved, right? We don't even know if it's going to be able to open. We see that it's controversial, so we're going to hand something over that's valuable to a private company before we even know that they need it or they can use it? That doesn't make sense to me. That's like putting the cart before the horse. And so I raised this question in committee, and I said, this seems problematic to me. And the House member who was pushing for this bill to be passed said to me, don't worry, this easement is conditioned on the Hell Foundation opening a recovery home for first responders. Because I said, why can't we just wait till January? She said, don't worry, it's conditioned on that. I said, all right, great. It's not conditioned on that. That is not the language in this resolution. Look, why grant this right before we know it even is needed? And so I'll answer the question with respect to the senator from the 56th. If not now, when? Well, I'll tell you when. January, if and when this project is approved. We're not saying no. We're not saying absolutely not. What we're saying is let the locals deal with their issue, and then once the Hell Foundation goes through that process, gets the zoning approved, come back up here in January, and I will be on board. But at this point, this really seems to be immature. Thank you. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 12th to speak to the resolution and the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. As my good friend, Senator Lucas, and I don't know your number, I can't remember numbers, always says, Let's just tell it like it is. On yesterday, we talked about hate crimes. We shed tears, held hands, kumbaya, we love each other. Today is another day. And this reeks of let's dump something that nobody else wants in their neighborhood into a black neighborhood. Trying to find an affordable house in Albany, Georgia back in the 70s. I found a really nice neighborhood. I always got yard of the month, so we weren't just, you know, folks that didn't want to keep the house up and the neighborhood to look nice. And when I looked out the window every day, there was a neighbor leaving and another, you know, so fast they even lost the refrigerator off the truck because they didn't want to be close to me. Now, fast forward 2020, I live on a dirt road because I was sick and tired of being rejected by the individuals that were in that neighborhood. These people want their neighborhood. They don't want, and we use first responders, we use rural folks, we use veterans as a means of getting what we want most times. Please, don't insult us like that. Today it's the first responder, tomorrow is somebody else. You put in those homes. We are tired of it. These individuals have probably been residents of that community for a very long time. And all they want is to be left alone and not have to deal with maybe tomorrow what are we going to get instead of a first responder. No, everybody in here wants to be a part of helping first responders. But we don't want to be a part of something that is going to take away from our neighborhoods. This is what we call institutional racism. I don't usually come to the well and say these kinds of things because we have learned as blacks to adjust to this kind of treatment. And we should not have to do it all the time. Allow these people in their community to make decisions about what will happen in their community rather than somebody that doesn't even live there. It is very, very unfair. Very unfair. This is an age-old problem for us. We are accustomed to it. But we should not have to be. We should not have to be. So, I'm going to take my seat and hope that we will understand, you will understand exactly how the senator from the 22nd feels about his community, where he was born, raised, and the community that he represents. And I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 23rd to speak to the measure and the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I too am in support of the project that's proposed, the providing some treatment facility for our first responders, the first in Georgia, probably the first in the nation. I too, like some of our lawyers, have been in the middle of zoning disputes, some involving the property next door to me, which I lost. Other times it was to rehab an empty building that had been a schoolhouse that I'd gone to school in, to convert it to senior apartments. The neighborhood came in and raised Cain It delayed that project a year, and since that project went in, everybody is claiming credit for it. It rehabbed a huge empty building. What you have in Richmond County, which the senator from the 24th, as well as I represent, is a big empty building. It had been an Episcopal convent, 30 beds, sitting on 20 acres. And the only access to this property was through the neighborhood. All this does is redirect traffic away from the neighborhood, provides another route so that the traffic issue becomes a non-issue. The neighborhood wouldn't want the traffic if it wasn't a rehab center or a first responder center. This will improve the situation on the ground. It will take an impediment away from the local decision makers, because right now they're saying, well, the neighborhood doesn't want all this traffic. Well, here's a way to solve a problem. The technical schools, they're okay with it. Whatever eventually goes in this property is going to need access. And I submit that redirecting traffic in and out of that property is best done away from the neighborhood. And I strongly urge you to vote against the amendment and for the bill. I yield for questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you.
The chair recognizes the senator from the 31st to close debate.
Ladies and gentlemen, when I was last here, I made the statement that this is the annual easement conveyance bill. I didn't say it was routine. I didn't say it was normal. I told you what it was. And that's the truth. We do these, I think, every year. Now, you might could prove me wrong. You might find a year that we didn't do any, but we do them almost every year. I want to commend the senator from the 22nd for his demeanor and his conduct and his composure whenever he spoke from this well a few minutes ago. He was much more passionate in the committee meeting. We talked about a lot of different things in that committee meeting. I believe that were irrelevant to this bill. What we seek to do here is to help our first responders. Now, thankfully have not had to serve in that capacity, but I have spoken with people who have served in that capacity. I remember a few years ago, there was a plane crash out in my area out there, West Georgia. A plane took off from Hartsville. It was a twin-engine turboprop. And as they were climbing out, headed west, one of the blades came off of one of the propellers, which caused a violent vibration. I think the engine ultimately separated and came off the aircraft. They were trying to get back to West Georgia Regional to get that airplane on the ground. and save those passengers and crew. If I recall, they got back within probably a mile of the airport. But they got to the ground before they got to the airport. There was a fire, as you can imagine, a plane that's just taken off from Atlanta. Had a lot of fuel on board. Not too easy to land a plane with that condition. So the crash occurred and there was a fire, and the first responders responded. When they got there, there were still cries from people burning to death in the airplane. And they fought that fire. They pulled those charred bodies out, loaded them up, packaged them up in body bags, loaded them up, and carried them to the hospital, to the morgue. I'm also reminded of September the 11th. – 2001. You all saw the pictures. The World Trade Center's on fire. There were people jumping out of the top of that building. They didn't land gracefully either. And guess who responded? Those first responders. Now, I hope none of you have ever had to endure anything like that. I hope you have not served our country in the armed services or as a policeman, where those men and women who serve alongside of you have been killed. This does not mandate rezoning. The community, the senator that spoke before me, did not want this traffic for this center that's going to help these people recover from these traumatic experiences. They didn't want them in their neighborhood. Somebody referred to it as a landfill. Now, these men and women who have served our country don't deserve to be compared to a landfill. But they didn't want them in their community. And so the state has offered an easement across state property to keep them out of their neighborhood. Now, that's a public street. I would think that anybody that wanted to could use that street. But the state recognized the importance of helping those men and women, those first responders, by granting this easement. This easement allows the local community to make that decision. It doesn't force anything on anybody. It just says that if they decide to do this, that they can go across the state property. We customarily try to help our local governments for public good. These first responders that have endured these horrific experiences. So I would ask for you to vote against the amendment and for this bill and respect the authority of the local zoning boards. Thank you.
Senator has yielded the well. All right, first we're going to take up amendment number 1. The question is on the adoption of amendment number 1 by the senator from the 22nd. Is there objection to adoption of the amendment? There is objection. All those in favor of amendment number 1 will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? Mr. Secretary, will you please close the machine? On the adoption of amendment number 1, the yeas are 21, the nays are 27, and the amendment is lost. All right, now we're going to take up the measure. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Questions on the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor of the resolution will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? All senators voted. Mr. Secretary, please lock the machine. On the adoption of the resolution, the yeas are 29, the nays are 19, and the resolution having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore adopted. For what purpose does the senator from the 19th rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that the Senate agree to the Conference Committee report to House Bill 793.
Mr. Secretary, please read the caption.
Committee of Conference report on House Bill 790. Three, the Committee of Conference on House Bill 793 recommends that both the House of Representatives and Senate recede from their positions and that the attached Committee of Conference substitute to House Bill 793 be adopted. Committee of Conference report adopting a bill to be entitled an act to make and provide for appropriations for the state fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020, and ending June 30, 2021, and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 19th to speak to his motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I bring to you House Bill 793, the Conference Committee report. Just a little cleanup bill. This process has been very public. You all have know more about this bill than possibly any other ones that we'll take up this year. And I need to praise a few people before we go too far into this process. First of all, the conferees, the majority leader and the president pro tem, for the help that they gave to this process, as well as the conferees across the hall, the speaker pro tem, the House majority leader, and the chairman of appropriations, Chairman England. Without their help through this process, there's no way we would have reached where we've reached today. Thanks also go to many people who are watching online now, but aren't in this room due to social distancing and COVID-19 and the way our body is currently set up. Many of you may not know this, but we have 8 budget staff analysts. 2 of them you know very well, you see in this building. They work day in, day out, and have been working 17-hour days since the beginning of May to get to the process that we stand at now. And I want to thank Andrew, Courtney, Austin, Caitlin, Natalie, Elton, Brent, and Melody for the work that they've done. Just want to say thank you on behalf of the Senate and the people of the state of Georgia. There's others as well, Jasmine and Kathleen downstairs, integral to this process. Martha, Christine, and Ashley, who work on the House side, thankful for their help as well. The foundation that this budget was built on, though, was pretty firm. And we know it well. It was a foundation that we were used to for almost 2 decades. I'm not supposed to mention senators by name, but Senator Jack Hill was an institution. He was a legacy. He came into this building serving with the senator from the 41st, who told us stories about how they hung out in the early days together. And his fingerprints are all over this budget, and as I've said before, his fingerprints will be over our state budgets for many, many years to come. When Chairman Hill passed away, he knew we had a huge task. He knew we had a task of cutting roughly about $2.607 billion out of the budget, and the Senate Appropriations Subcommittees got to work. You were asked to take 14% out. The beauty of this process, though, is you did not do it yourselves. You went back. You did not try a top-down management. You went out to the agencies and asked them to submit their proposals for how they could accept a 14% reduction and still provide services to our citizens. Throughout this process, while 14% is hard, while cutting 10% is hard, the process did get slightly simpler. I'm not going to call it easier. I'll just say slightly simpler. As Georgia's economy reopened and revenues rebounded slightly, the governor was able to tell us we should prepare instead for a 10% reduction, and then, as you know, on Monday to tell our 11% reduction, and then, as you know, he told us on Monday to prepare for right around a 10% reduction. To make that process even more simpler, again, not saying easier, the governor recognized $250 million from the Revenue Shortfall Reserve and $50 million from tobacco settlement reserves so that we would have roughly 1% in conference committee budgets to put things back. Yesterday, when I entered this chamber, we kind of joked there was a C on the board. Folks back home jokingly texted me and asked me if that meant Corona. It did mean Corona. It meant conference, because we have literally spent since Friday afternoon downstairs working with Chairman England and Martha, Christine, and Brent and Melody and others on working on this proposal. We've changed over 170 pages, roughly 2,500 lines. And we changed those not because we wanted to. We changed them because of something that I love best about this body. It's deliberate. We listen to each other. We bring ideas forward. We have thoughtful debate, just as we had on the past bill that immediately preceded us. And when you brought those ideas and those priorities forward on Friday, we worked through the weekend to try to implement them. We worked through the week this week to try to implement them. We worked to make sure we aligned our budget with your priorities. And I hope we've done that. Throughout this document, you'll see the conference committee agreed with the Senate's position 78% of the time. But to be fair, we were in a little bit different position than the House was when they passed the budget originally in March. On the 22% of the time the conference committee differed with the Senate's position, it was generally for add backs to items that you mentioned were your priorities. And I want to go over some of those here now. In public health, we were able to remove all the furlough days. We were able to restore grants to local county health departments. At DCH, we were able to fund maternal mortality for 6 months for postpartum care pursuant to House Bill 1114. I know it matters to a lot of the senators in the room as well. We were able to add $12 million to the $3 million base for a total of $15 million for rural hospital stabilization, which is important to almost every single senator on this side of the room. And for those watching, that isn't a party. We just literally sit in order of numbers and have more rural people on this side of the room. In education, we were able to add back roughly $400 million from the initial cut to QBE, while still fully funding sparsity, equalization, training and experience, and fund people transportation at its proposed level. We also continued the purchase of school buses to the tune of roughly $21 million-ish in bonds. You'll note in the House budget we did something that you asked us to do. Many of you asked, well, how did the CARES funds play in? The CARES funds played into the tune of about $457 million that went straight to your local school systems. So when you hear about our reduction percentage-wise, please know that some of that is somewhat diminished and somewhat cushioned by the $457 million in CARES funds that went out as a Title I allocation to almost every single one of your school districts. I'm actually pretty proud of our local school systems. We've heard from superintendents, we've heard from teachers, we've heard from those in administration on down to even the pre-K, which isn't really our K-12 school system, but we've heard from them as well. I'm proud of what they've been able to do with their own budgets. We know that due to CARES funds that they've now been able to acquire and hold in reserves, we know that due to savings that they've been able to hold in reserve themselves, that they have roughly $3.2 billion in reserve funds. They are slightly better off than the state right now, and I just want to commend them for the stewardship that they have provided of local tax dollars as well as state funds. We were also able to restore the Governor's Honors Programs, Georgia Awards, and other programs that were previously funded out of the Governor's Office of Student Achievement. In public safety, we were all able to remove all furlough days in public safety, as we were already able to do in the Senate version. We also added, at the governor's request, $15 million for local law enforcement training grants. In human services, we were able to add back to the Marcus Autism Center, the Matthew Reardon Center in Savannah, and various other autism-related contract concerns that you, as members, brought to us. We've also asked for clarity on a few things as we move forward into the future. On border state tuition waivers, we've asked that the USG provide a report on that, how it affects our taxpayers, and also how it affects student achievement, and have that report back to us by December 1st of 2021. We've asked that our court system look at what consolidation would look like for human resources, payroll, and other administrative efforts that currently we thought were housed in the administrative office of the courts, but we've realized are in different agencies. The reason we're asking for that is because we only have 6 to 8 days to get this done. It's really not fair for us to try to rush and ram something through. But if our economy, if we're looking for savings in our 2022 budget, we'd like to have the data that backs up the decisions that we make. Some of you may not know this, we actually have several health benefit plans. We don't just have the state health benefit plan, we have a different one at Regents, et cetera. We've asked USG to provide us a report by December 1st, 2020 to lay out whether a larger pool, through combining those smaller pools, will create benefit savings for the taxpayers of the state of Georgia. And we've also asked our friends at the Department of Veterans Services if we should consider the implementation of the zero-based budgeting plan that was laid out originally in 2017 and look at eliminating duplicative services that we think are currently provided by the the Federal Department of Veterans Affairs and move more of our funding into veterans' homes that we feel are need to be better served. We did not move any of those dollars at this time. We just asked them to give us that report by December 1st of 2021 as to whether or not moving those funds would be a good idea. Georgia and Georgians are resilient. We see this currently with our teachers serving meals, our state employees working from home or battling against the spread of disease, our local and state public safety officers and National Guard working to protect us daily. Because of the direction and leadership of people in this room and people across the hall, we will continue to weather this storm. And this budget process provides us with a way to meet the needs of the citizens of our state while also recognizing they have less money to spend and we're unwilling to take more money out of their pockets and paychecks. Thank you so much for your work, your process, and your involvement to get where we are today. While the process has been difficult, I hope you all have felt included. Thank you for allowing me to chair this part, to get to this part today. If there are any questions, Mr. President, I'll yield for them now.
Senator, you have no questions.
Thank you again, members of the Senate. I ask that you vote favorably to the Conference Committee report to Senate Bill or House Bill 793.
Chair recognizes the minority leader to speak to the bill.
Members of the Senate, I rise to ask all of you to consider that this budget is a product of our past works. You know, each of us look at this budget and we know that we're faced with a pandemic, and we know it's challenging to think about moving money from pot A to pot B, and it's tough to decide what's fair and what's right. There's no easy answers when you're moving money from the health department to the education or education to environmental protection. All these cuts and all these challenges are difficult. And it's difficult for either one of us, any of us, to know exactly what is the 100% right thing to do. And I'm sure the staff and the chairman have tried to do this in a way that was inclusive. But I'll be honest with you, it probably is more inclusive for some than for others. For the chairs of the Subcommittee of Appropriation, the Green Door Committee, for those that are floor leaders for the governor than it is for the minority party members. And in this pandemic, it's been very difficult for all of you to feel included in the budget. But I do appreciate the work he's done on some issues that I asked him about. I'm sure many of you appreciate the time and effort that he took to listen to our issues, and whether it was our concerns for maternal mortality or other issues on this, dealing with this pandemic that we're very, very committed to. We appreciate the time and effort he's taken to give to all of us. But as we look at this budget, we have to realize the road we're going down. Not all of the cuts and all the places we are here today is due to the budget. And I brought this up before on other issues.
but the tax cuts of the past have put us in a very vulnerable position. The 5.75% that we get instead of 6% on the income tax made it very difficult coming into this session to even fund the important things we had in the state for operations. It made it very difficult. In fact, it was impossible for us to keep up with the employee pay for state employees. It made it, even with the governor's increase that he was recommending for education, we weren't keeping up with the same earning potential or income for teachers that they had 20 years ago. So as we address this budget, I'd be just remiss to say that the chairman was challenged to begin with because of our past practices and policies. And that if we're going to look for a rich state, a healthy state, a prosperous state, that when we need not only look at how we cut the budget, but how we strengthen the state, and what that some funding is necessary. And the taxpayers are proud to participate in a state if they think their roads are getting better and their education is getting better. And I hope that each of you will look at those issues as we go forward. Many of us are frustrated with this budget because we asked you to at least look at some of the tax exemptions to special interest groups that we felt weren't bringing a return to dollars. But as we pass this budget today, and I assume that it will pass, we know that the efforts from the senator from the 56 on some tax breaks, senator from the 52nd looking to maybe bring some reality to tobacco tax and how it addresses our health was not addressed. The concerns of the minority party on many other important issues never got addressed, and we won't see the realization of this budget. At least they're not addressed before we vote on the budget. There's still things hanging out there. You know, I have half mind to move the table until we see what happens on the final day at the final gavel. But certainly I won't do that. You want to address this issue today, and it's an important issue. I commend the budget to each of you for your review as the chairman has and decide whether it's the best job we can do. But certainly, if we had headed down a course, I think, of fiscal responsibility, which means a progressive and reliable tax base that can fund the things that keep our rural hospitals open, that keep our bridges safe, to keep our water clean, we wouldn't have had all the challenges that we have with the pandemic that has cut another couple $2 billion from the pie. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your work. Thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to speak. And thank you for each and every one of you that give your input on this budget and work on these important issues. Thank you.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the motion on House Bill 793? The chair sees none. Senator from the 19th has moved that the Senate adopt the conference committee report on House Bill 793. All those in favor vote yea, opposed nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? We got one more. One more. All senators have voted. Mr. Secretary, please close the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 40, the nays are 14. The motion has prevailed, and the Senate has adopted the Conference Committee report on House Bill 793. I want to take a minute to echo the senator from the 19th's comments. There's so many folks to thank for this process, Melody and Brennan, so many others in the office, but there's one more person I'd like to thank, and that's the senator from the 19th. Incredible work to get us to the point we're at today with one of the most difficult budgeting situations in maybe any of our memories. And to get here, and I think the ultimate compliment would be, I believe, if Senator Jack Hill was sitting right here today, he'd shake your hand and pat you on the back and look you right square in the eyes and say, great job. Thanks for your work. All right, we're going to take an hour break. We'll come back at 8 o'clock. Dinner is here. I'm not certain where it is. If somebody wants to direct me, out in the hallway. There's dinners here. We'll come back to session, come back to order at 8 o'clock and continue to take up the rest of the Senate's business. Senate stands at ease.